We are in the home stretch, everyone. So thanks for joining us. Damian, thank you for joining me up here today.
Thank you. I brought you a Starry since there wasn't any out
Yeah,
on the
you got to get the
table.
The product placement just right. Make sure the cameras get that, please. We are talking on a topic that I think we've all been kind of hitting on the head here pretty close around the activation of all of these initiatives, but we're focusing on digital activation, we're focusing on the individual consumer. And Damian and I last week, when we first started having our conversation, local brand activation, I mean, I can't find a better person to talk to around this topic. So first of all, Damian, I'd love to get a little bit of a formal introduction of yourself, role, responsibility, and then we'll dive into the topic.
Awesome, absolutely. So yeah, Damian Chatman. I need to update my LinkedIn title because it's a little different than Jeff's Growth Brands, but no, I work on our North Division marketing team, and so essentially what that means is, oversimplifying, is we have our sector team that is responsible for our national marketing execution, and then we have 4 divisions that are North, Central, South, and West, who are responsible for activating and bringing to life our brands locally through our sports partnerships, quarter turning our brand activations where we see it more relevant to that consumer's needs, and then also our franchise bottler operations that we have a couple very large bottlers in our North Division that we lead their marketing for them as well.
And that is oversimplifying it, because there's a lot of nuance that obviously goes into this. Pepsi's so ubiquitous, nobody's trying to figure out if they leave right now, where can I find it? Like, it's everywhere, right? But you're also very strategic, especially after we talked about it, about the events that you're doing, the partnerships that you have, and how you do the research to ensure that you're capturing the brand, your brand, the messaging around it, but also the community. I mean, you get it right, it's fantastic. Nobody even notices it. Like, yes, you caught the spirit, but it's then a learning opportunity, like we learned earlier, if you don't get it right. So what's your process for launching these events and these activations?
Yeah, so it's a couple of different ways in. One is really tying it to the brand and where the brand has the right to play. So, for example, Pepsi, the spirit of Pepsi is unapologetic enjoyment, and so really bringing that to life. And so one way one way in for there is through our NFL partnership and our partnership with our NFL teams. And so we really focus on the fan experience in that space. And so it's the tailgating, it's the going to the game. How do we get people ready to make sure that they are ready to experience that sporting event, however they decide to watch it, whether it be with home with friends, tailgating, et cetera. And so we want to be there to make sure that they are able to bring their full self to how they want to enjoy those experiences. So through that, we partner with both athletes and teams and figure out a way that Pepsi plays the role and to bring that to life.
One of the things that we talked about, and I think that this will be a great use case, I asked you a couple of your favorite examples of how this all came to life. Talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about Indy 500, everyone else this weekend. So IMS is one of our partners as well. And so it's a great case for us because, as everyone talked about, it's a huge local moment that really taps into the fandom and that this local market enjoys. And so looking at it from a data standpoint, we look at the brands, so from a challenger, battleground, and stronghold standpoint. And Indiana, for Mountain Dew, is a stronghold. So a lot of Mountain Dew drinkers in Indiana. It's great. So it's great. So it's a perfect fit. We have the consumer, we have the consumption, and we have this great local moment within the community that we can lean into. And so we partner with our retailers to bring it to life, to land the lobbies with great branding and great point of sale in store. We also do activations at the track. So if you go to the race or any of the qualifying, you'll see our sampling and events going on in the pagoda space as well. And then also we try to get consumers the opportunity to go to these events that maybe they're not. So we through consumer promotions and opportunities to win that way. So we try to marry all those things up to drive display and consumption with the branding together. So,
how about the All-Star event that we talked about? Because one of the things I like about this too is it chased up the entirety of the organization.
Yeah. That's a great one. So last year, NBA All-Star was in Cleveland, and so that falls within our North Division. And so the great thing about that one is that one goes between our sector team and our division team, because one of the things we do really well is like these big marquee events. So, I mean, you all know like Super Bowl, All-Star, we show up really well at those events, and those are very sector-led. But then within the division, we try to link that up to make sure that we are bringing that to life in the local market. And so one thing that we did differently in Cleveland was, instead of focusing just on that weekend for All-Star, we tried to figure out how do we own the 6 months leading up to All-Star and say, like, we want to make this an event that everyone's excited about, everyone's gearing up for the next 6 months, instead of just owning, you know, those 3 days that it's there. So we worked closely with the Cavaliers, who are our NBA partner there, and did activations throughout the season. So kickoff, the season. Before that, we did promotions leading up through All-Star Weekend. We're giving consumers opportunities to win everything from tickets to All-Star Game to signed autographs from players that were potentially going to be in All-Star Weekend, and then partner with our sector team to create a moment where we took not only from a large format, which is our Kroger, your Myers, your big stores where it's easy to land in the lobby, and bring that to our Own the Streets, which is individually are very small customers, but together they make up one of our largest customer bases. And those are all your up and down the street mom and pop C&G stores that everyone's stopping in, going, you know, on their way to work or things like that to buy something. So we wanted to bring that same experience from the big, large format into those on the streets and through instant gratification ways that people can kind of buy 2, buy 3 Mountain Dews. You get a free pen with the opportunity to extend that experience further into a digital environment. So.
I think one of the things that's hard to really think about here is it's 6 months for 3 days. It's like a roller coaster ride, right? Wait in line, it's over real quickly. But you're taking the learnings from that weekend and then rolling it right into the next thing. What is that process with the team like? How are you getting the learnings? What data and insights are you looking at from this kind of rolling calendar of events that you've got structured?
Yeah. So obviously first is share, that we grow share. And not just in that time period, but also not in that market, but relative to everywhere else. We're investing more in that market, and so we would expect that we should see exceeded growth in that area. So first thing we looked at was like total Ohio share for Dew for that, and then we narrowed it down as we got closer and closer into the Cleveland market, into that area, and geographically said like, okay, well this worked. Like we saw an uptick, we saw more consumption, we saw versus rest of the market. And the other thing is buying multiples and trying to get people to buy multiples of beverages at one time. So that's one. And then additionally on top of that, we look at inventory and on display and number of displays we got in the stores as well. So both from just pure share and sales and displays standpoint, were we growing there. From the consumer standpoint, or for the activation standpoint, between me, I could care less really how many people actually enter some of these programs. It's really more of an unlock to get the retailer excited about it. So it is a nice to have. It's a bonus to say, okay, we had 100 people enter, 200 people, but it's really more about like, did we unlock the display, and did we unlock the sales, and then did we get people to drive the consumption?
To switch it a little bit on the athlete endorsement piece, what is that process with their creative and their brand, because you guys are trying to combine these components as well? How does the team work with their team, or what does that look like when you're executing? And which one's your favorite one to work with too?
So that process is one that you definitely have a lot of learnings, because athletes are individuals and they have their own agendas as well. So sometimes they work really well and sometimes they don't. It's just how it is. And they are playing sports, and so they get injured. So that's something you can't account for as well. So we try to marry all those things up and look at it through that lens and say, how can we best do that? But a couple of things is really, what's the value of the partnership, and what are we really getting out of it? And so we've gone back and forth on as far as like, appearances and photo shoots and all these different things that cost a lot of money. And we're like, do we really get a lot of value out of those things, or what do we really need? And so we've scaled that back to look at it from, we need their name, image, and likeness. Like we want them to be able to show them, we want to be able to use them. We may go into autograph items that we can use for consumer promotions or as incentives with some of our retailers. But then also look at like, how easy are they to work with? Because I'd rather work with a second, third tier athlete for that team than a premier player that's hard to work with. So to go to your question, not any bias, Miles Turner is actually one of my favorite athletes that we have on our roster. He's been the longest running athlete for a while on Dew. When we launched Starry, and Starry became the lead brand for the NBA partnership, he was the first one to kind of sign up and say, yes, no problem, because we had to go in and we signed him up for Dew, you just get to switch the brand on him. So he's the first one, raised his hand, said, no problem, posted on his social without any issues, does really well and got speaking engagements and things like that. So he's just, again, easy to work with, fans love him, and he obviously stands out.
Yeah, and that's that local knowledge, right? That research that you're doing ahead of time of how is this campaign going to reflect the community and as many people within the community as possible to have the biggest impact. One of the things that we talked about too, because I lived in Chicago, I live in the suburbs now, but my wife's a huge Cubs fan. And so we would go to games, and every time the Cardinals play the Cubs, there's a big Anheuser-Busch ad that they put over making fun of the Cardinals. It's always witty, it's very funny, she loves it. But how deep are you getting with that localization piece, right? The content, the creative around those instances.
Yeah, so the structure we're in now is actually pretty new, so we're still learning a lot. I've said we've gotten really deep and learned that it was not the best thing to do. We've gotten as deep as working with local restaurants and you don't get, while those things are nice and they feel good, you don't get the scale, and it's no easier to do it with one customer than it is to do with 100 different restaurants. So we've gotten really so again, we've tried to look at it, level it back up a little bit to say how do we stay local but also drive some scale and try to make things more of a quarter turn versus doing something custom and unique. And so it is a challenge, especially when we think about things with our food service partners, because we do want to drive that situational salience. Like, you want to buy your Papa John's pizza, you want to have a Pepsi with it, and so but Papa John's wants their pizza in the picture, not just generic pizza. Yeah. So you have to do all these custom versions of these different creatives, and then Papa John's is the easy one because they have to have a lot of locations, but think about that of every mom and pop restaurant and things like that. They want their burger shown in the image, not just a generic burger. So we've gotten a lot of learnings as far as it's nice to be local, but still got to be able to drive some scale.
When you guys are looking at driving these initiatives and executing them, what's the process for picking and choosing which event? It seems like you guys do everything, but I mean, you have to be a little bit selective, right? So what goes into the equation to launch an event in Detroit, to do something in Philly, to do something in Indy?
Yeah. Right now, it's laddering it up to make it feel like one cohesive brand. So this goes back to the learnings of we were starting to do a lot of things that didn't feel like one brand. So you might be in Indiana, you see something for Dew that's related to basketball. You might see something completely different in Michigan because we were just being too local and trying to do too many things. So one of the lenses is how does it ladder up to the holistic brand experience? So for Pepsi, we said one year we did a bunch of different, every NFL team we did something different with. And so in Cincinnati we did a fan endorsement and idea, and there was be fan of the year kind of thing. And then Philly we did something different, and so it was all these different versions. Where now it's okay, no, football watching is better with Pepsi, and that's the overarching umbrella of the idea. And then everything ladders up to that, and so that if it doesn't ladder up to that pillar, then we decide we're not going to pursue that.
Not going to go after it. Okay. Round of applause for Damian, everybody.
Thank you.